And now I give the word to Davide Spallazzo from the Polytechnic of Milano with another project, Mobile Technologies and Cultural Institution, a Design Perspective.
I only will need
the remote control.
So good afternoon. I will start my presentation with a very obvious claim that today the access to cultural heritage resources can be considered a mass phenomenon. And of course, if you look at this photo, you can understand very well what I mean. And the public is evolving very fast. And this morning we had a good presentation about the evolving public. But despite this evolution, the visiting model very often rests on a passive consumption of content. And at least if you are able to get close to the artwork in this specific case. But a visiting model that seems to be unable to foster the aim of learning and the enjoyment that are defined by ECOM as the aims for museums. Mobile technologies very often are, sorry. I know, I'm sorry, I'm using two, so. So mobile technologies and their potentials are very often pointed as a way to achieve new visiting model, but despite the very, very long tradition of mobile technology within the cultural institution, very often the introduction of these tools within museums is still very problematic. I make you an example. We are here in the US in 1961, American Museum of Natural History. Do you see any difference from what we do today with smartphone? The only difference that I see is in the hairstyle of the girl. Instead, the visit model on which they rely is exactly the same that we use today. Of course, there are differences in the devices, in the technologies, and so on. But I think, and I'm not alone, that we can shift our attention from technologies, from what we can achieve, and towards the practices we can enable with this technology. So we must stop using new technologies to propose old methods of visiting, trying to exploit in a better way these technologies and their potentials. Some years ago, I started working on mobile technologies. From my perspective, I'm a designer from a design department of a technical university. And so I try to work on this field using my tools, my methods, and of course also my process. And so I try to define a process to design a mobile experience. Here you can see, for example, a very common design process that starts with a brief. That is the aim of the design process. It goes through an analytic phase that can be set as a research phase, and then arrives to a synthetic phase that is a creative phase of design thinking in which we arrive to a definite project. And then we go through the implementation and the testing phase till to the market. If I must think of a brief for mobile technology, I can imagine to design a mobile experience for cultural institution able to foster learning, enjoyment, and together engagement. And when I say engagement, I especially means social engagement between people visiting the museums. The second phase, passing to the analytic phase, in my opinion, is like a research activity that is aimed at defining the structure, the framework of the experience, taking into account all the main issues to design a mobile project. The main issue that I considered relevant for the project are those you read here, that are target, time, space, technology, content, relationship, and I will explain what I mean, learning, and social aspects. I know you cannot read anything on this big graph, but it's only to make you understand that in my mind, the analytic phase is like a checklist, not a very strict list of guidelines, but a way to sensitize designers on the important things to be considered, to be taken into account while designing a mobile experience. In particular, I see some points, for example, some constraints from which we must start while designing a mobile experience. These choices are due to exogenous factors. For example, the target. It can be the target of the museum. We cannot decide a new target, for example. Where and when the mobile experience should take place, but also the technology. So we use external vendors, or do we have internal experts? About the contents, we can decide which kind of content we will provide to users. So about the collection, about the building, about external collection to the museum to make relationship, or using intangible heritage related to a collection, but also the level of deepening of these contents, and also who will edit these contents, experts or users, or them together. Instead, looking at the relationship, I mean the criteria we can use to match users, so visitors, with contents, but also with other users. We can match them by profile, by visiting behavior. We can match them for needs and requirements expressed by visitors, but we can also use the position in the museum, for example, or just a random criteria. We can also ask if we match people or people with contents and assets using homophily or heterophily. Let's say artworks you make like, or artworks you make totally hate or dislike. We must take into account also these. And finally, in the analytic phase, I must think of the social engagement of people while visiting museum, because all you know that it's a very important part of a visit and also of the learning aspects of this. If I move to the social aspects, I usually use this me-to-we process that has been designed by Nina Simon some years ago, that goes from at stage 1, that is passive consumption of content, to the stage 5, that means engaging socially with people. And about sociality, we should also ask how people visit museum from a social point of view. They arrive together or alone. I like very much this semiotic square that has been designed by De Benedetti, that adds to the very typical visiting model, so the alone visit and the together visit, two more dynamic experiences. In particular, the separated visit that takes into account when, for example, a couple arrives to the museum together and then split because they have different tastes about art, for example. Or on the contrary, the not together, the not alone experience. I go to the museum and I will like to engage with other people socially, so I stay in front of an artwork and try to speak and explain my point of view. We should take into account also this kind of users. And looking at the learning aspects, I try to summarize all the literature about mobile learning and the literature about museum learning. And I defined 3 main approaches. I know they are very generic, and I know that there are a lot of experts of museum education here. I'm not an expert, but it's only a way to sensitize designers about things. I defined 3 approaches. The first, that I called focused, it's a behaviorist paradigm. It relies on a drill and feedback activity. So is teacher-centered. It's the most common still today in museums. The second is an immersive approach instead, that is based on a constructivist paradigm. It means that it's learner-centered, and very often it's based on simulation, on games or narrative experiences. And the last one, that I call collaborative approach, asks people to build knowledge together, so to share knowledge and build something new. Of course, all the choices that has been made in the previous analytic phase must be supported also by mechanics of interaction. And with mechanics of interaction, I mean very basic mechanics that we can activate with mobile technology. I make you some example. For example, Here you cannot read anything again, but I will make you some example. For example, at the low level of these mechanics, you find the content consumption. So a very, very simple mechanic. You are there with the phone and you read. But if we go up, for example, we can find the mechanic question. It asks people, for example, to make questions in real time to other visitors, to people on the web, activating, for example, wiki dynamics or crowdsourcing dynamic, or simply asking information to people, to experts that are available for them. Or the mechanic serendipity. We can use mobile technology to inform people of possible bodies nearby. And with bodies, I mean also not only people, but also artworks. You have been profiled and you can find interesting things just moving a few steps in a direction. It was serendipity. And for example, we can also use, the smart of flash mobs mechanics. It means, for example, collecting people in the same place at the same time, for example, for delivering a lesson or a social activity together. I'm in the museum, I will have an information in real time, and I will gain other people at the same time in the same place. So these mechanics can be together with the choices made during the analytic phase, converge, be digested and explored during the synthetic phase. For synthetic phase, I mean a process of creative ideas, so of creation of a new visiting model that can be defined into a new visit experience. In the design field, we usually create scenarios. We use a storyboard to test an idea. We don't make really working prototype. We tell a story, and we try to test this story with people, with users, just to understand if it works or not. And then when we are sure that it's working, we can try to implement it and develop it, and then test it again. So in this phase, we define the main story that stays behind the experience, and at the end, we will develop it, defining also all the dynamics of interaction between people, between actors that are involved into the mobile experience. At the end, of course, it will be implemented and developed and launched on the market and so on. I'm quite happy with this framework that I presented today, because we use it several times and to develop several projects, and we use it also with design students in our faculty to help them reason about designing mobile experience for museums. For example, the first project we developed is this, that is called Looking for Achille Castiglioni. Is a mobile tour developed with the Studio Museo Achille Castiglioni, the designer, and together with them we developed the tour to valorize the rich documental collection and archive through the city. Another project that we made is Polimi Walks. We developed it last year for the 150 years of our institution. They are cultural tours in the city about architecture, design, and engineer, of course, to valorize our culture, our way of working in the city. Another one that is brand new is Play Design. Is made of two games. One is a treasure hunt, one, and a role-play experience. The other, they are addressed to young students, so high school students, to let them know something more about design. So I said you that, yeah, I'm quite happy, but every time we develop a new design project, I must ask myself if the final user are really enjoying what we did or not. And I ask myself if they are using it or not, or it's just an app that they download, open, and close immediately, just to know the new app. Let's see what is this new app, and then I will close it. So the things that I fear is that when we take care of all the things that we consider relevant, for example, how many minutes people stay in front of an artwork, or the learning approach, and so on, we miss something very important about the real visitors. I make you an example. I think you all know this app that is the Magic Tate Ball from the Tate Modern. It has been a great success because in 2 months it has been downloaded 100,000 times. So for a museum app is a record, I think. I think it's the most downloaded app. Do you know how it works? You download the app, you open, then you shake the phone, and reading the weather, reading the strongness of your shake, and reading the position, so where you are, it will suggest you an artwork. We can stay here for hours discussing if this app is well done or not, if it's really educative or not, and so on. But one thing is true. It has been a very big success in this field. I explain this success in a way, and I want to show you in a practical way. Here we have 2 squeezers, 2 juicers. One from Russell Hobbs and the other for Alessi from Philip Stark, the designers. If I ask you which squeezer is more efficient, I'm sure that all of you will say that the first one, the Russell Hobbs, is more efficient. I just put an orange inside and it will do all the things for me. But if I change my question and I ask you, which squeezer do you want in your kitchen? I'm sure that most of you, and I hope so, will want to have the second one in the kitchen because the second one makes the same function of the first, but it keeps it very simple. It has a very big and brilliant idea behind. It's a good shape. And also, it has a very evocative aspect. So, at the end, I will suggest you that everything is a matter of design. And also, when we develop an app for a museum, we must keep under control that the final result must be attractive also for people, and that maybe not all the visitors are interested in having very strong and detailed information, but just to spend quality time in a museum, and the Tate app show it in a very clear way. So I thank you for the attention, and thank you.
Thank you. You brought your presentation on the design aspect and on the design experience, and I would love to know if there have been among the different aspects you listed in the design experience job, if there is one or more that were particularly difficult or particularly interesting, and why?
Yeah, I think that the 2 most difficult parts are those about learning and social engagement. About learning, because when we talk about mobile learning and museum learning, a lot of theories are there, waiting for us, and we must face them. On the other side, when we speak about social engagement and mobile technology, it's a very difficult field because, you know, mobile technology, mobile devices are strictly personal. And trying to imagine mechanics to stimulate social engagement using mobile phone is a very difficult task. And when I talk about social engagement, I don't only mean social networks and so on. I mean social engagement face-to-face in museums, just to have direct explanation of contents and information.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.